Now we would move on to the next session, which is healthful eating, and it's moderated by none other than Dr. Sangeeta Agarwal, who is a consultant OBGYN at Mumbai, and she is also the founder member as well as the joint secretary of the PCOS Society. Sangeeta.
Thank you, Dr. Patil, for those kind words of introduction. It is my proud privilege to conduct this panel discussion on healthful eating, and we have a galaxy of speakers here, and I will introduce them. Dr. Ms. Neeti Desai is a consultant nutritionist at Kambala Hill Hospital, and she's a secretary and master trainer for the Association of Diabetes Educators. She is writing a regular column in various portals for our health and nutrition. Next slide, please. Yeah, Mrs. Priya Karkera. She's a Chief Nutrition Officer at Fitterfly Technologies Private Limited, and her focus of interest is in the pediatric nutrition. She's attached to Surya Hospital in Mumbai and is winner of the WICA 2020 award for innovation in technology in nutrition. She is also the honorary secretary of IPEN Mumbai chapter and India coordinator for GNP, and has a lot of research papers to her credit. Ms. Shilpa Joshi is the director for Mumbai Diet and Health Center and is a practicing dietitian and diabetes educator. She's also the vice president of Indian Dietetic Association for 2019 to 2021, honorary secretary of All India Association of Advanced Research in Obesity, and master trainer for diabetes conversation maps. She's a course director for the National Diabetes Education Program for over a decade now, and has trained more than 3,000 diabetes educators. We have Mrs. Shaini Chandran, who is a sports dietitian specialist and is the first Indian to be certified as a graduate in holding a diploma in sports nutrition. She has trained in nutrogenomics from the Gene Support Institute in Pune, and is a consultant sport nutritionist, weight management specialist for the Tamira Aesthetic Clinic, and she has loads of sports who's who in the sports industry who are under her care for healthy eating and diet management. So we have a great panel, and we will, dear panelists, welcome here on board. Now for the panel discussion, the plan is that I have this girl who is called as Asha, and I will go through various stages of her life, right from her teenage years to her menopause age, and we will post those questions which we as gynecologists commonly face from our patients over diet and nutrition. Actually, Dr. Madhumita Prem Kumar's lecture, if you heard, has answered a lot of questions on vegan diet and intermittent fasting, and I'm sure you all of will have a lot more to add to the whole thing. So let's begin. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. So Asha is a 18-year-old girl who has delayed cycles. She has acne, she has facial hair, and she's a standard known case of PCOS. She's under the care of a fantastic gynecologist, and she's she has been advised that she should eat and lose weight, control her weight, etc. So this question let's start with Madam Neeti Desai. How will you guide her?
Right. So on the outset, I would like to thank PCOS Society for having me on this platform, and more importantly, for having partnered with IDA Mumbai chapter, recognizing the multidisciplinary approach to PCOS. Coming to the question, yes, we would be first taking a diet recall and identifying whether the caloric intake is high, is the carbohydrate intake high, is the protein intake low, and then also checking about the physical activity level. Also trying to identify whether the diet also has serves the endocrine disruptors or even the age products, what we call advanced glycation end products, which also disturb the hormonal milieu. And then, of course, working out a calorie deficit, balanced diet, encouraging physical activity, and of course, convincing them, which is the most important, that weight loss will have a very positive effect on most of the PCOS symptoms.
Okay. So could you please elaborate on what is endocrine disruptors?
Right. So basically, there are certain substances which are mainly man-made, which kind of are disrupting the hormones in the system. So the most common kind of offender is the plastic. Not all plastic, but the plastic which has BPA. So that is something which we very often tend to kind of see that, you know, children are using the water bottles, the nashta, the snack box they take to school or even to college. So we do, besides the calories and the protein, we also try and identify whether these products are being used. And that's one of the simplest way of eliminating the plastic from your day-to-day use. Even the thermal paper, which is used in a lot of tills, machines, also has in fact BPA. So ideally, we should not be storing them or keeping them with us. We should be discarding them. Canned products, all the cans have BPA lining. So again, encouraging them not to use canned products, not only for BPA, but also they are processed and they're high in salt. So yes, these are the most common endocrine disruptors. Of course, then there's lead and arsenic and many more of phthalates, but these are the most common that we come across.
Okay. So, Dr. Shilpa, how would you, what kind of calorie deficit, how do you calculate what she's taking and how much you should be giving? Is there a sort of a formula which we can use in our clinics and tell them that this is the formula that you should be following?
So first of all, again, at the outset, I would like to thank PCOS Society for having me here. And when we talk about calorie deficit, there are two ways looking at it. One is a very theoretical way of going by ideal body weight and multiplying it by 20 to get the net calories that should be advised. Now, what happens is more so ever than not, that is a very ideal number, which is very difficult to follow. What most of the dietitians would do is they would look at the current intake. So like Neeti said, you take a very robust recall, and that recall includes 2 working days and a holiday, because in India, holiday is only to exercise. To food, it is double work. So you eat more, you cook more kind of things. So what happens is you take a very robust recall, you see to it what comes out as an average caloric intake. Then there are 2 ways of going about it. First, you create a calorie deficit. Now, this is again my personal experience. This is not going by textbook. What textbooks recommend is a 500 calorie deficit to create weight loss. When I give 500 calorie deficit, my patients go into depression before even I start talking about diet in detail. So what I have observed is go 300 calories is a decent number, 250 to 300. You have to also talk to the patient. You have to see how prepared they are, how much shock can they absorb in terms of what diets you are giving them. So we go by, what we hear out of them. We go by the ear and we sort of plan diet. But in PCOS particularly, it's not only calorie deficit that is important. What is important is how are you distributing calories among nutrients, that is carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And in India, we all know that all that we eat or even think about eating is carbohydrate. And I think that needs to change as far as PCOS goes. So first calorie deficit, then calorie distribution, both are important, and calorie distribution per meal is important. So what happens is people are very upfront about eating dals and non-veg in lunch and dinner, but breakfast, so poha upma and nothing else. So there is no talk of protein in the breakfast. So even in a snack, fruit is something, a healthy snack would be considered again completely protein deficient. So something like, that's the basic way in which a diet plan goes.
Okay, Dr. Joshi, thank you. So now Asha is going to take your advice on calorie deficit. She's agreed and promised you she will go by the distribution that you have assured her. But she's 18-year-old and she tells you, I have a great friend circle and every Saturday night I have permission from my parents to party. I go drinking alcohol and I eat Italian and Mexican food, which is 1-inch layer thick cheese. I have to have it. So how will you help her and guide her? What will you tell this 18-year-old? We can't tell her stop partying and no drinking and no cheese. So
you know what happens? Dietetics is one profession where there is a lot of wheeling and dealing which happens in our chambers. So what happens is, first, before we start giving a diet plan, the first question is, cheat day kitna milega? That's the first question before we actually tell them what is the diet. So I think what we need to talk about is, yes, once in a while you can have, you don't have to, if you have ordered a pizza with a lot of cheese on it. See, the thing is, if you're going partying, you're not definitely going to eat salad there. I mean, that's too much to ask an 18-year-old girl. So again, if they want to have one drink and eat one slice of pizza once in a while, it's acceptable. But if they're going to go partying every Friday and every Saturday evening and have like 10 tequila shots and 10 slices of pizza, that's not permitted. So once in a while, cheating is okay.
What is once in a while?
Once in a while is like once in a fortnight maybe, and one drink and a little bit of food. And again, don't get me wrong, drinking is not a recommendation. It's an allowance.
Yes.
So we are not telling them, please go ahead and drink. What we are telling them is, if ideally don't drink, but if you want to drink, this is how much you should be drinking.
Yes. So if, is there some cheat foods that, suppose when I'm partying, is there a cheat wine that this wine is best and this cheat food is the best amongst all the others?
And cheating is cheating, right? I mean, cheating itself is bad. So when you cheat, once you have decided that you have to cheat, then there is nothing like good or bad cheating. Because see, we, you know, in India, there is a very interesting concept, you know, whenever it's bad food, we talk about Western diets, right? And everybody, whoever speaks that foods are bad, they only give pizza and burger as an example, as if samosa is star food, as if kachori is star food, or gulab jam is great food. India also has its own set of fast foods or highly refined, high calorie food. And not all Indian food is like sacrosanct and you can have it as much as you like. So one has to understand that Western food by definition doesn't mean it has to come from Europe or USA. It means it has to be higher in calories, highly refined, high amount of salt, sugar and fat. So, you know, so it's not always that cheese on the pizza is bad. It can be bhajia, which can be bad. It can be samosa, which can be bad. And so as long as you decide to eat very little of it once in a while, and like you rightly said, once in a while has to be specified. Because once in a while can become 2 times a week also. So that is very important to put that benchmark.
Yeah, thank you so much. Now move to Dr. Shaini Chandran. So this Asha is also a very disciplined girl, because on the weekdays at every day at 5 p.m. she goes to play badminton or she goes swimming. And she wants to know what she can eat before the exercise and after the exercise, because she's ravishingly hungry at 5 p.m. and after the exercise.
Okay. Before I start, thank you so much, Dr. Durusha and Dr. Patil for having me here as part of the panel. And it's such an honor and privilege to be here. Thank you so much. Okay, so before badminton or swimming, the best would be to have some healthy nuts. So it could be a handful of nuts, and can also be a protein powder. Usually, what I would recommend is a gluten-free, dairy-free diet for people with PCOS. So a plant protein powder is what is recommended. Could be either soy products or maybe even a peas protein isolate. That has been, I've seen it in my practice. It's like pretty helpful because it reduces the inflammation to a great extent. Another factor is soon after the session, it's best to go ahead and eat a meal which is well balanced and it has quite a lot of vegetables and also protein on the plate. Because when it comes to Indian diets, and especially as a sports dietitian, when I look around, as Shilpa said, the amount of protein is like very, very low. Even if you were to look at rajma or chana, Kabuli chana and all that, you will find 30 to 40% of carbs sitting there. So if you're eating chapatis or rotis with a vati of, rajma, ya mot, or any of those butter beans, double beans and all that, the amount of carbohydrates still goes up. So a lot of people might end up eating quite a lot of carbs. And for PCOS, it becomes so very important for them to restrict the amount of carbohydrates, but then of course bring in a lot more good fats and good quality, high biological value protein into their diet along with vegetables. So yeah.
Thank you. So now this girl has, lost weight, and she is now 25 years of age. She is going to get married in 3 months, but she put on weight again. Okay, she had lost it when she was 18, but now she's 25. She's gained weight all over again, and she's going to get married in 3 months. And she tells you, doctor, in 3 months I have to lose 10 kilos because I want to look very good on my wedding day. Now, what kind of diet do we advise her? Does she go into, sometimes they tell you, I've hit the gym, I've started a diet plan. I in fact know of a patient who was told by somebody ki namak khana band kar do, as soon as you stop salt you will lose weight. And she stopped salt, and after 16th day she fell down on the treadmill in the gym because she just lost her balance and she fainted. So before marriage, everybody is doing all kinds of things. Now, as far as diet goes, how would you advise her?
Who is the
so
question?
Dr. Shilpa.
Okay, first of all, I'm sorry to say, but such patients are extremely challenging because 10 kg, see, you don't gain 10 kgs in 1 month to lose 10 kgs in 1 month.
No, sorry, let me specify. I just meant to say that she had lost weight when she's 18, but now over the years again she has gained.
Yeah. So first thing is, we can help her to lose weight. We cannot have a number in mind. This is typical question which is asked on the phone. Madam, 1 महीना diet करेंगे तो 5 kilo जाएगा क्या? This is a very typical question which is asked to all dietitians or everybody. So we cannot predict what the weight loss is going to be. We are going to try our best only by healthful eating patterns, which I described a calorie deficit. And just today at RSSDI, I presented what works better, continuous caloric restriction or intermittent fasting. And I actually presented data which I collected in over last couple of months during lockdown. Okay, and what I saw is younger people. Dr. Madhumita also spoke about intermittent fasting, but what my study shows is younger people between the age of 20 to about 30, 35 are more open to intermittent fasting. Post 35 people prefer continuous calorie restriction because they want to eat those whatever set 4 or 5 meals a day. Also, the weight loss between both the groups was not different. So people in both the groups lost weight, both the groups metabolically improved, but the difference between either group was not statistically significant as far as my study shows. But after saying that, if this girl is open to intermittent fasting, I forgot her name, Asha, right?
Sure.
Asha, yeah. So if Asha is open to intermittent fasting, then there is a lot of Asha also, because she's going to lose weight fatafat, and it's going to be easy for her. Also that in intermittent fasting, a lot of people feel that it's eating ad libitum for those 8 hours that you are not fasting. And that's not true. A very well-planned diet is required at that time, especially if she has PCOS. So we're going to look at calorie restriction. We're going to look at, like Shiny said, decrease the amount of carbohydrate, put in good quality fat, increase the protein intake. But after doing all that, we need to tell her that you go with one set of clothes during your wedding. By the time honeymoon is over, you'll have to change your clothes if you do not keep following what you are following. Because weight gain is very high when you stop following a diet. And hence diet plan has to be, like Dr. Madhumita said, integral part of your life. You cannot lose for an occasion, and when the occasion gets over, you're on honeymoon, you're buying clothes again because you don't fit into anything that you took with you. So I think that's something that you need to talk to your patient.
So during this time, is there any other diet? There people say, okay, can I do a keto diet? And there are some people who ask that there are some injections I can take. Is there a magic pill during this time to help them quick weight loss over a short span of time? Is there something that you add?
Weight loss is hard work. Health is hard work, I would say, but weight loss is definitely hard work. And so there is a lot of data. I am not a very big fan of keto diet because I feel like keto diet, you need to have a very good dietitian and you need to go back to her to maintain your level of ketosis. It's not easy to maintain ketosis, especially with the Indian mentality where all you can think is about carbs. So it becomes very, very difficult. You need a dietitian and you need to keep going back to her, which we very rarely see with our patients, that amount of compliance that they are coming every week and seeing us. So that is difficult. But if you look at scientific literature, there are so many papers showing, comparing so many diets, and ultimately every paper at the end has concluded all diets cause weight loss, and the weight loss is the function of diet followed rather than type of diet. So as long as you follow a diet given by a dietitian, you're going to lose weight. There is no problem.
Would any of the other panelists like to make a comment here? Dr. Priya, Dr. Neeti?
May I add something?
Yes, sure.
Okay, so most often dealing with PCOS clients, like I've seen children who are in school, say standard 11 and 12, most often it is the board exams, the stress, they stop playing sports. So I've just seen children who've been very active in sports right from, age of 5 or 6. But when it comes to 10th standard and then 11th and 12th, there's inactivity and then starts this entire thing. And the degree of insulin resistance also varies quite a lot. And some people respond very well when the carbohydrates are limited to a great extent. For example, certain people might respond very well when you are still giving some, say, 2 idlis or 2 dosas for breakfast and dinner, and then lunch ke liye a little bit of rice or something. But for some, they just wouldn't respond, and you really have to reduce the quantity. And another factor is there are people who would be exercising regularly. I've worked in fitness centers where they would come religiously exercise for 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the evening, and still they wouldn't lose weight. And later what I figured out was they had food intolerance, and removing gluten and lactose actually reduced the inflammation. Most of them had non-celiac gluten sensitivity, and the waist and abdomen, the ratio, waist to ratio reduced drastically once the inflammatory triggers, the anti-inflammatory diet was given, and that helped a lot. So a gluten-free, dairy-free diet kind of really helps. So I've seen it's not just about counting calories, but it's also understanding the client's case and then hand-holding them. And there's this very popular concept about if you want to lose weight, go ahead and eat every 2 hours. That just doesn't work when it comes to PCOS or anyone with insulin resistance. Because every time they're going to be eating, that's going to trigger the release of insulin. And they're going to convert whatever they've consumed into fat, and that will go and settle in the adipose tissue. So intermittent fasting seems to help a lot of people who are very receptive. Another factor that you've noticed is there are some people who definitely need breakfast, but they don't care much for dinner. And there's another segment who are happily, they'll be very, very happy to skip their breakfast, but they would want a good lunch and a good dinner. So the idea is to customize according to what they need. And more than the ketogenic diet, what I've noticed in my practice is a modified Paleolithic diet, where the dairy is out, but then a lot of good fats come in. And since I'm from the south of India, we use millets and then a lot of rice. And so there's no gluten. And then there's also besan chilla, moong chilla, the other things that we bring in. And I even use some ancient rice. It's loaded with micronutrients. So the idea is not to count calories, but teach them ratio. Say, for instance, 1 katori rice, then 2 or 3 cups of vegetables on the plate. The basic formula would be to step up the amount of fiber that goes in, and also cut out the roots and tubers. When I say roots and tubers, even the carrots and beetroots are out. Okay. You might find it a little shocking, but then the amount of calories, like I've seen clients who used to eat bowls and bowls of papaya, watermelon instead of a meal, and they were just not losing weight. It's only when we had to tell them that even the fruits have natural sugar, but then that sugar is going to trigger insulin release. So kindly cut that out and then bring in a lot more fiber. Then they started getting results. So I thought I should just share this.
Sure, great. Excellent points. Very good take-home messages. Dr. Priya, would you like to add something?
Sure. So thank you, PCOS Society, for having me on this panel discussion. Very happy to share the panel with very dear colleagues from the nutrition segment. So yes, I think one mantra that I promote to every adolescent or probably even to my children at home is, what is your protein in every meal that you take? So count your own protein, whether it is your breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, snack, or a mini snack or dinner. yes, drastic weight losses are something that we definitely don't advocate. But every time you look at your plate, where is the P or where is the protein coming in from? So, like Shiny said, like Shilpa said, and like Neeti said, yes, we have to cut down carbs, add more fiber, but protein, protein, and protein. We as a country are protein deficit, and I think somewhere even having a good cereal pulse combination as per the new guidelines, if you have a good cereal pulse combination, the protein bioavailability increases. So yes, Indian diets are carb loaded, but something like a khichdi with vegetables, with more of the pulses, adding some more paneer to it or a soy product to it. So definitely look at vegetarian and non-vegetarian proteins. So protein in every meal. I think that's my message to all the weight loss fans.
Excellent. Thank you. So very good take-home messages. So now Asha is happily married for 3 years. She's 28 years of age and she wants to conceive. So she's taking the help of assisted reproductive techniques to get pregnant, but she has been advised to lose weight. So what this is for Dr. Shilpa. What advice would you give her? And also, is there a role for inositols at this point of time?
So she has PCOS and hence she is going for assisted reproduction, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So she will have to lose weight. I mean, that is what we hear. I mean, we see our patients. They need to lose weight if they are going for any of the assisted reproduction. So the guideline would be same, like Shiny said, like Neeti said, like Priya said, that you look at hypocaloric diets which are rich in protein. Because she's going to get pregnant, you look at nutrient dense diets. That is diets which are rich in folate, I mean all the vitamins, but primarily folate. And in India, what we need to really look at is vitamin B12. Because our diets, even when they are non-vegetarian, for the reason that vegetarian diets do not have B12 on their own in them, but even non-vegetarian diets are so overly processed and overly cooked, and most of the sources of non-vegetarian B12 sources are organ meats, which most of the people will avoid because of the cholesterol content or fat content in them. And a lot of people do not actually eat organ meats in India. So I think we need to look at micronutrient supplementation also. Inositols, well, the data is very inconclusive as to whether inositols should be given or not given during infertility treatment. But because it is, it's basically a carbohydrate. It is hydroxycyclohexane. So it can help to reduce insulin resistance. And if that can help, one can give inositols to this patient.
So if a patient has been doing intermittent fasting before getting pregnant, now during pregnancy, do they continue intermittent fasting or they go back to eating like we tell our patients, short frequent meals through the day?
It's for me?
Yes.
Well, I am not a very big, I don't think anybody, all the dietitians here are not fans of small frequent feeding, because like Shiny said, there is nothing like small. Feeding is feeding, because in real life, you may tell people to eat small. Small is a very relative term. And hence, as long as they're eating 3 square meals, a snack, if the, in pregnancy, a lot of times, they cannot eat much at one go, especially later in the pregnancy. So if they want to break a meal, they can and eat a little bit later. But I do not think eating every couple of hours is something that they need to do when they are pregnant, especially if they have things like GDM and other things.
What about intermittent fasting? Should they continue that in pregnancy?
So see, intermittent fasting, you can achieve calorie goals. But my problem is, do you want to keep that woman not eating anything for 16 hours and just having clear liquids like, whatever, black tea, black coffee, or whatever? I have never advised it, and there is no guideline for it. So if for me to very firmly say whether I should give or no, I wouldn't do it on my own, because I don't see a guideline where it says that I can do it for a pregnant woman.
Okay, so that means if she was doing intermittent fasting during pregnancy, she has to stop that process and go back to eating at least 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. Is that right? Correct?
1 snack.
Okay, 3 meals and 1 snack.
Yeah.
And what is the view of the other panelists? Dr. Neeti, Dr.
Yeah.
What do you feel?
So I had, in fact, pregnant woman coming just last week who has been doing IF and now she is expecting, and she was very adamant to kind of continue because she thinks it has helped her. I mean, I would increase the window period, so I would not stick to just 8 hours of eating. I would definitely increase the window period. Also, in the early part of pregnancy, there is also very often the issue of morning sickness, which may not be morning, it could be even evening. So we need to take that into consideration also, and definitely increase the window period, not just keep it to 8 hours.
Okay, great. Thank you. So now we move on. Asha was pregnant. She has delivered happily, and now she has a 10-year-old daughter who is constantly on mobile, watching Netflix, and who insists on eating all the fast foods, whether Indian vada pav or McDonald's. So she is very concerned, and this question is for Dr. Priya. She wants to know how she can counsel her daughter. What should she do?
Uh, Thanks for that. I think 90% of the Indian population is battling this question, especially in our households, and more so this time of the pandemic. Some basic concepts when it comes to children versus adults, when we are talking about weight loss or good habits, the first thing would be parents becomes role models. So I think she's not developed this habit at 10-year-old all by herself. Asha needs to ensure that she, her husband, or the family is not sitting on gadgets all the time. The reach of a 10-year-old child to junk foods, I would say, is probably not sudden. It's over the time. So, celebrating the first year birthday or second year birthday in fancy restaurants with fancy foods is not something that the child is asked. It's the parents' wish to provide that kind of an atmosphere and say, wow, this is fancy. What if we said, wow, this moong chila is fancy, or wow, this paneer frankie made at home is fancy? So I think parents play a very, very big role when it comes to what the child is choosing or what the child is cultivating as a habit. Now, of course, the child is already 10 years old, so I think it's a little lost time, but it's never too late. So small concepts to children, what I personally also advocate is teach them the concept of calorie in equals to calorie out. This is something that we learned way back in basic nutrition, and I think even for adults, I mean, for children, it's very difficult to restrict and say, no, you're not going to eat ice creams, no, you're not going to eat samosa. So one is teach them, if you've eaten a samosa, do you have the energy and stamina to walk up 10 floors or walk 4 kilometers, or probably learn to burn it out? So when you show these kind of actual hard work that goes into burning that 200, 300 calories which you have just binged, maybe some children adapt to it. Second thing is binge eating or keeping them available of such foods to their reach. So, like stocking biscuits and stocking wafers at home, I think these are not best practices. So it's like poverty in midst of plenty. There is so much available at home. Instead, what if you had a bowl of nuts kept on the dining table instead of having, packet of chaklis and wafers stocked at home? Again, storing aerated drinks in the fridge. So these are all home practices which you need to say completely no to. So your weekly shopping should have nuts, probably seeds, healthy fruits, healthy vegetables, and that should be your go-to items. So I think habits are not cultivated overnight. So, as parents, become role models, see that healthy foods are available as choices so that the children reach out to those foods. There is, in my practice, what I do is if the child is younger, I would say 75% of the blame goes to the parent. If a child is of 10 years old, I would say it's 50-50%. So 50%, it's parents who have to compromise, and 50% the child who has to compromise. As they get older, I think I would put in more bringing in that consciousness with children. So an adolescent, I would tell them, you are responsible because you take charge of your own life. So, when we have this lean PCOS or early PCOS in adolescent, or when the menstrual cycle is irregular, I tell them, you have to take charge and you have to say no to this food and you have to become health conscious yourself. So bringing in that sense of responsibility in today's children who are extremely smart, I think, who can learn coding and who can figure out which gadget is best for you, I think they definitely have that sense of responsibility to choose the correct food for themselves. So
I agree with you, Dr. Priya. And we've been through this situation, and as soon as we tell the parents the responsibility is yours, let me tell you, 50% of those parents will tell you back that, oh doctor, हमारे ज़माने में there was no Swiggy, there was no culture of going to cafe coffee day and having coffee after coffee, and our children just don't listen. So again, they always have this issue that the children are now into this social media, which never existed in our times. We never taught them this social media, and we never told them all about Burger Kings and McDonald's because we have not experienced it. Anyway, so is there a pill, is there any tablet or any medication that you think they should consider for the children? Is there something?
No pills, no magic pill can absolutely, kind of bring in a lifestyle change. I think the pill is something that the parents have to swallow and kind of accept that, yes, I'm the culprit. So parents, when they tell me, "Arey, ma'am, she's only on gadgets," there are children who have come and told me in my clinic that Mummy also watches, Dadi also watches, so I'm also watching. So, this has happened where parents, like children are like, वो लोग खोलते हैं. The parents don't have to say that, when I say 20 minutes is your eating time, a family time, whether you sit on the floor, you sit on your table, when nobody has to have gadgets. Neither mummy, nor dadi, nor papa, nor chacha, nor chachi. So if you can cultivate those kind of very small habits as goals for the entire family, I think, somewhere parents do accept. Yes, in the first statement, they are, very non-acceptable about them being the culprit. But when you give these kind of examples, like, a 2-year-old child never asked for a birthday party where you have all, calorie loaded, carb loaded foods, whether it is bhajia, vada, pizza, burger. It's like I said, the concept of wow. There are so many children or, younger children and parents whom I have taught this concept. हम कचरा को छी क्यों बोलते हैं? How does a child learn that a kachra is kachra? Because we have built in that this is chi. So it is bad. So why don't we do that? Why don't we say chi samosa hai? Because हमें भी वो chi लगता नहीं है, तो हम नहीं बोलते हैं that, samosa is chi. Right? So it is very small concepts, and then later on in life to teach them portion control still becomes easier. But the first food, like a mother feels very happy if the child has eaten French fries. I mean, why can't that pleasure come when she's eating a methi bhaji? Why can't she say, wow, there is methi bhaji? I mean, the biggest complaint, green leafy vegetables, is a no. Because when the child is seeing that color, he kind of builds it up like, oh my God, what is this? What if I said, wow, it's palak, right? So I think it's just how we portray food to be to children. So it's wonderful food psychology. Like I remember, my daughter played with kanda and batata when she was small. Of course, we didn't have gadgets even for them. So I had put in a concept of chocolate is bad and it is cheap. She refused to wear anything that is brown in color. So the concept of chocolate being bad became brown color being bad, to an extent of chico bhi nahi khati thi season mein. So so it was, I realized, and when I did that with my son, he happily gobbled up all the chi chocolate. So maybe one mantra doesn't work for all. You have to understand and play with the child's psychology. It's like teaching a good habit versus a bad habit. So I think, and of course, I think the biggest statement is be role models. If you have eaten a heavy Sunday brunch, go out to the family, the entire family goes out to the garden in the evening and takes a walk. So what is the child imbibing? Yes, I can eat a heavy lunch, I can party in the afternoon, but I have to ensure I have to play and burn it out in the evening. So these kind of concepts is what we need to teach children instead of saying no to any foods. So portion control and calorie in equals to calorie out.
Okay. Great, thank you. So that was a great take-home message, that you have to set an example, be the role model, and be the change that you want to see happen around you. So great. Now we move on. Now Asha is now 50 years of age. She's menopausal and she's putting on weight, and she says, I'm putting on mainly on my tummy and on my back. So what can I do? Yeah, and she also wants to know, is there any role for soya products as is being advertised so much? That should she be increasing her soya content? So this question is for Dr. Neeti.
Right. So she is menopausal, and obviously there will be kind of fat deposition around the abdomen, and that's the kind of the bad fat which we are all worried about, because that increases the risk of metabolic syndrome and the sequelae, the hypertension, lipid profile, elevated sugar levels. So we need to explain to Asha that around this age, basically the metabolic rate really drops. So you cannot be eating the same that you've been eating for the last 30 years. Your dietary intake needs to be looked at. And more importantly, you need to, even if you want to eat the same or you want to not reduce the portions too much, you will have to burn more. So the physical activity component needs to come in. And at the time of menopause, not only for weight loss or for weight maintenance, even for your bones, even for your cardiovascular health, I mean, there are multiple benefits. So the physical activity has to be really, really encouraged at this time. And of course, the calorie deficit would have to be created. Again, keeping in mind that as all the speakers have mentioned, the carbohydrate intake is generally high, which will have to be moderated. One interesting point I want to make is that we did follow up a series of PCOD patients in my clinic, and we had a study which is going to be published. So I also expected that the carb intake would be very high. Carbohydrate intake was high, but surprisingly, the fat intake was also high. And it was basically the hidden fat, the fat coming from the biscuits and the cakes and the pastries. So, you know, people having curry biscuit and butter biscuit and having biscuits with tea. So even the fat intake needs to be looked at. Inherently, again, a lot of different cuisines use coconut, peanut, besides, of course, the ghee and the oil that we use. So all that kind of adds up. So we will have to look at the calories and the distribution of calories and up the physical activity for sure, which we could start very gently with just a walk. If she has not exercised for a while, start with a walk, but gradually build it up.
So, Dr. Shaini, are there any particular products, food products like calcium or milk, etc., which you would say you need to increase because they are more likely to have osteoporosis now, or they are more at the risk of cardiac illness, and we want to increase their physical activity, but they at this same age tend to have osteoarthritis and joint problems. So how do they look after their body, and what dietary changes should they be doing? You need to unmute.
Yeah, I've done. Okay, so what happens largely is a lot of people think about exercises, you know, they only associate it with walking or else say a cardiovascular activity. Right from the age of say 30 onwards, you know, they should be focusing on weight training also. That is what gives you a reserve of muscle mass. And over a period of time, by the time they hit menopause, they will still have a good amount of lean muscle tissue. Now, what happens is during the age of say 20 to 30 or 30 to 40, they would have tried a whole lot of fat diets or else taken up some, you know, cut and paste diet charts from somewhere and then tried something on their own. And most of them have very low lean musculature. And that is the biggest problem. Sarcopenia is something that we face all the time. And usually when we send people for DEXA scan, you get to see that their lean muscle mass is very low and then their visceral and subcutaneous fat is quite high. So I think to prevent osteoporosis at some point in time, whenever a client comes, say at the age of 20 or 30, we should educate them that at least thrice a week they should take or do some amount of weight training, or at least there are few people who don't like weight training at all or hate stepping into gyms. So in that case, what I would always do is recommend them to a professional trainer, a strength and conditioning coach, and teach them exercises using their own body weight. So push-ups, pull-ups, they can do a whole lot of things at home, sometimes even yoga. So you're using your own body weight to do the exercise, which means you're still stimulating the bones, and that's also going to give them a lot of strength and also improve their core strength, because a lot of people end up with disc bulge or else a disc prolapse. It happens quite often, and I've been dealing with a lot of people in the IT sector also. So at the age of 35, 40 itself, they have a whole lot of issues. So strengthening the core becomes very, very important. So that is one aspect that we focus. Next thing is sunlight. a lot of people are not exposing their body to sunlight. Okay, how many of us wear saris? At least when you wear saris, you know, your skin is exposed, you're getting some amount of sun. And then a lot of us are inside the air conditioned environment. Another factor is also they wear, you know, the fancy for skin, you know, you don't want any tan, so they don't want to go out in the sun. Another factor will be late night binge watching shows, which means they're waking up at only around 7, 7:30, 8, 8:30. And after that, they, you know, the sun is out and they don't want to go out. So these are the very practical things that they come up with. And they said, you know, we don't want to step out in the sun, which means vitamin D levels are very low. They're losing hair, they have bald patches, and then they don't have the energy, they have depression like symptoms. And all this will actually make them all the more quite moody, and they're not going out there and getting adequate exercise either. So it's all interconnected. It's like a matrix. So the idea is to inculcate habits one after the other and then untying the knots. So you really have to look at that aspect. Another factor is also with exercises. They might go to the gym or do a Zumba or something for 1 hour, and for the rest of the day, they might be just sitting and working. So using a pedometer or some kind of, you know, gadget to count the steps. So we call it as non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So throughout the day. So if you can carry a bucket of clothes and put that out in the terrace for drying, or if you want puja, meaning flowers for puja room, walk a distance. Don't take your bike or else, you know, car to buy flowers. If the grocery is out, is exhausted, walk to the nearby place. So if you can walk in the 3 to 5 kilometer radius of your home, nothing like it. So how much do your legs move? And do you have standing, you know, stations in your office? So these are factors that one really needs to focus. And another thing is also emphasis on sleep. Are they going to bed at 10 o'clock or are they going to bed at 12? You know, there's a huge difference. They should be in alignment with the circadian rhythm. So going to bed at 10 and waking up at 5:30 or 6 is going to be perfect. Otherwise, what would happen is they would end up with a lot of sugar cravings, a whole lot of food cravings. So the foundation for any wellness journey, the first step is sleep. The next thing would be, of course, to ensure that they're drinking adequate water. A lot of us are working in air-conditioned environment, right? So setting right the basics, like, you know, drink adequate water, you know, have a lot of soups, have buttermilk, have thin buttermilk, because probiotic, gut health, there's a lot of benefit. That's another aspect. Next thing is chewing and having mindful, you know, eating practices, not sitting in front of the TV. So once we set these basics right, the next would be to go ahead and then ensure that the plate is full of green leafy vegetables. Bring in calcium through a lot of millets, and then bring in chickpeas, rajma, sesame, and all of that. So there are so many factors which can be added. A lot of calcium rich sources are there in the diet, so those can be brought in. And seeds, seed cycling is also quite helpful. That is also very helpful. So flaxseed, chia seeds, cucumber seeds, melon, pumpkin seeds, this could also come in. And of course, methi dana.
Stop here. About the seeds, how much to have, which one to have, and when to have. Can you just elaborate on that?
I think each one has a different strategy to follow. I'm sure I would love to hear what Niti and Priya and Shilpa would want to say. But usually by default, what I would definitely give is methi dana, fenugreek seeds. It has saponins. It has also got soluble fibers. So that's one thing which actually improves the quality of the follicle. So I work with a lot of infertility, you know, clients with those issues. And before they even go for IVF, a lot of gynecologists refer the clients and will say, help them lose some weight before I put them on IVF procedure. And most often they actually end up getting pregnant the natural way. So I think that's the beauty. So rather than counting calories, seeds, fenugreek, and then a mixture of pumpkin, melon, cucumber, flax, everything mixed in a bottle, and then at least 1 to 2 spoons a day. And then seed cycling as a therapy is a different ballgame altogether. So it goes by the menstrual cycle. Okay. There are few.
Do you recommend these the seeds 1 to 2 spoons per day only for the 45-year-old pluses or across all ages?
Across all ages. 20 and above, definitely an adult, they can definitely take, yes.
Okay, great. So now, you know, we have some rapid fire questions which Asha has. Okay, right. Which oil should I be using for cooking? Because there is a lot of hoo-ha about sunflower oil and sesame oil and coconut oil and olive oil. So which oil?
Cold pressed groundnut gingerly oil. Down south, coconut is used quite a lot, and also rice bran oil, and a little bit of butter or ghee, provided it is grass-fed cow's milk ghee. The CLA is much higher when the cow eats grass, not cinema posters.
So, Dr. Shilpa, white butter or the yellow butter?
I am not it's a saturated fat and medium chain triglyceride, neither white nor yellow. And if they eat butter, then they need to burn the butter off. If they promise to burn it off, then we can think about giving them.
Great. Okay. So even if they promise to burn, which one then? If I have to have butter with
Anything which is unprocessed, because your processed butter will have a lot of salt in it. So rather than having processed butter, then
unsalted butter available now.
But Punjab Sindh mein milta hai.
Yeah, there is a lot of unsalted. But at the same time, should we have the white one or the yellow one?
White one.
Okay, great. Now, what about rice? White rice or brown rice? Dr. Priya?
Brown, red, black. That's the go-to colors in rice. Lesser polished the rice, more is the fiber and the nutrient content that is retained. Down south, red rice is not a delicacy, it's an everyday food. But today, if you see in the markets, it's all labeled as, under different brands saying that this is more healthier. So it's our Indian staple food, the ukda chawal or the red rice down south. This is our Indian staple food. So definitely basmati or the more processed size, which is more, more common among North Indians. I think it's good to shift to a lesser polished rice. So to retain the nutrients.
Okay. So now there are a lot of, these Nature's Basket and all these places have packets of kale leaves, rocket leaves, which are so beautifully packed that you want to buy them and they're phenomenally expensive. So should I be buying kale and rocket, or should I be happy with my palak and methi?
Can we reach out to dill leaves, beetroot leaves, colocasia leaves, which is our Indian traditionally grown and available to us. Dill leaves, which is actually, it's the winter season now. I mean, I can't say winter, but at least we are stepping into a little colder climate where leafy vegetables are found in plenty. So, when we were talking, when Shiny was talking about pumpkin seeds, today they are so very fancy and packed and kept out in the market. My grandmother never threw the pumpkin seeds. It was always ground into a chutney. I don't remember any vegetable part being thrown into the dustbin. So even the cauliflower greens, all this used to be chopped and added to our vegetables. So she used to say, we throw all the good parts and we are using only the nice looking parts. So I have this habit of using beetroot leaves as equivalent to coriander leaves, or shepu leaves. Instead of coriander leaves, just chop it and put it into your dal, sambar, rasam, or your chole or your methi. So, it just becomes, you don't have to have only coriander. So any leaf, that leafy vegetable can just be chopped and used as garnishes. The nutrients are better retained because you're not overcooking these leafy vegetables and trying to feed them to across age groups. So I think more than kale or any of these fancy foods, just reach out to the market and buy more veggies which are fresh, which we as Indians have the privilege of having it, probably every day in our meals.
Nowadays, there's a lot of talk about quinoa, and in all fancy restaurants, you will have quinoa salad and quinoa this and quinoa that. So should it be quinoa, or we should be happy with our good old dalia?
Does anyone else want to take it?
Dr. Neeti?
Neeti, you're mute. Neeti, you're muted.
Please unmute yourself.
This is in addition to what Priya said. It's just a continuation. Instead of quinoa, we just need to move to our amaranth or rajgira. It's the Indian equivalent at fraction of the cost, and the nutrition benefits are more or less the same. Plus, we are so much used to using rajgira. On fasting days, a lot of communities use it anyways. So if you just even move to rajgira chapati on a day-to-day basis, you've done yourself a great favor. You upped your protein intake besides the other nutrients. So yes, dalia of course, but rajgira is even a better equivalent to quinoa.
That's also gluten-free. I would just like to add to Neeti. So when quinoa came into the market, I studied the nutritive value, and the book showed it was 10 grams of proteins in 100 grams. But if you look at the USDA values, the cooked quinoa has only 3 grams in 100 grams, which is equivalent to our other cereals and pulses in India. So it is no rocket science food out there. And a direct comparison, Rajgira has more calcium and more iron compared to quinoa. So, just adding to meaty out there. So I think amaranth or Rajgira, which is freely available and lesser, I think you can buy 5 kgs of Rajgira versus 1 kg of quinoa.
Thank you. That is very informative and helpful. One last question before we go to the audience questions. We have 10 more minutes. So the last question is green tea. Is it really the magical drink to lose weight, or should I be happy with my roz ka doodh, adrak, ilaichi ka chai?
Unless you're sourcing it from China.
Huh?
Yeah.
Unless you're sourcing it from China. Because when you look at most of the studies, a lot depends on where this green tea is sourced from and whether the soil is enriched with a lot of goodness. I think monocropping and all that leads to quite a lot of depletion of minerals, and green tea per se, compared to what is available in the market and what your research paper says, really don't know. Might as well have some protein rich drink rather than having green tea. Because I know people who have overdone green tea, like say drink 1 liter, 2 liters of green tea, and they've lost out, or rather they would be very deficient in protein. And anemia is so prevalent among Indians, and then just having tea, the tannins is going to inhibit iron absorption. So we might as well use the option, beverage option, could be something which is loaded with protein, than waste that opportunity to give a proper beverage. Green tea, I wouldn't, if at all someone likes maybe 1 or 2 cups, that's it. I would like to know what Shilpa, Priya, and Neeti have to say.
Yes, please.
Can I add?
Yes, please.
Yeah, I completely agree with Shiny, and the understanding among people is that 2 cup green tea pee liya na, baad mein sab paap dhul gaye. Means now you are ready to do everything. So that's not the way. If you are following a very good diet and you are supplementing it with 2 cups of green tea, then it might work. But again, we really do not know. You need about 300 milligrams of epigallocatechin to see some weight loss. And, but diet has a bigger role in causing weight loss rather than that coming from epigallocatechin.
Okay, thank you. Now, one very last question. Asha sometimes feels a bit low. So is there some few foods, 2 or 3 food items that all of you can recommend, which is like a mood elevator? That this is what you can have, this is safe, this is healthy, and it is a mood elevator. Because depression is quite common. Each one of you, at least 2 foods. So I will have at least 8 foods to go home with. Dr. Priya.
Go ahead.
Okay, so if I have to combat a sweet tooth, like normally moods are elevated with a lot of chocolates and sugars and cravings. So if I have to combat that and try to give her a little more satiety and a flavor in her mouth, are Indian herbs and spices. So like your elaichi and your cinnamon. So these can do wonders in curbing cravings. I'm not sure about its relation to elevating mood, but maybe that urge of wanting a sweet or having a sweet tooth, this has worked. So we've in fact given elaichi, cinnamon, ginger concoction to a lot of our weight loss and PCOS young girls who find it very fancy, and they felt better with it. We use a lot of cinnamon, not cinnamon powder, because per se, once you put cinnamon powder, the texture of whatever you're drinking becomes everyone may not have a flavor for it. So just boiling milk or boiling water with a stick, cinnamon stick, and then you can remove the stick where the flavor of it comes out. It actually gives a natural sweet flavor. So I would recommend cinnamon and elaichi. I think they are wonderful add-on flavors which can combat and curb other cravings, which one may relate to, to elevate their moods.
Shiny, any suggestion?
I would rather look at water intake, because if they're feeling very low, one is water intake, getting adequate sunlight, the quality of sleep. Okay. As far as diet per se is considered, definitely B6, the vitamin B12. A lot of people are deficient B12, just like how Shilpa had mentioned. So B complex. So unpolished grains, whole grains is something that we would focus on. And of course, eating a variety of lentils, that will also help. And of course, dairy products in case they're not lactose intolerant. I think if we could focus on these, a lot of it can be sorted. Another factor is नाश्ते के साथ चाय पीना. This is a very common thing in India. So you eat breakfast and then have a cup of coffee or tea. So are the nutrients bioavailable? It's a big question mark. The tannins which come in there and interfere. So that's also there. Another factor is when somebody is trying to lose weight, they end up taking quite a lot of fiber. So there's psyllium husk, or there's just excess soluble, insoluble fiber, all that comes in, and that can inhibit zinc as well as iron absorption. So I think these are factors one could look into.
Okay, Dr. Shilpa and Dr. Neeti, one food which is a mood elevator, if there is any, or
So,
some solution to elevate your mood.
So dark chocolate, a cup of warm milk with a dash of honey. And I would also check if she's feeling low, whether she is, she's not cooking herself, or she's not eating for long periods of time. Is she skipping meals? That could be one. But there are these few foods which can kind of pick me up.
Okay, great. Excellent suggestion. Milk and honey sounds very good.
Yeah.
Dr. Shilpa?
So honestly, when people feel low, I don't believe they should eat something. I believe they should go for a walk or go shopping. Shopping therapy is very good when you're feeling low, no calories, a lot of strain on your purse. So you automatically feel good. But if at all, then I think nuts and seeds are a good option to, if you're feeling energetically low, you don't have enough energy. I think that gives you that energy. So, whatever, it can be, if the patient is not affording, it can be peanuts and chana. But if you are affording and you can buy other nuts and seeds, then maybe almonds, pistachios, walnuts, or a handful of seeds. Well, I mean, a spoonful of seeds, any of this is a good option.
Great, thank you so much. Sabat, do you have any questions from the audience?
Yes, Sangeeta, thank you very much. I think we'll take a few questions before we wrap up. There's a question about seed cycling. I think we did mention, but that was like very superficial. So they would want to know more about seed cycling. Anyone, please.
Should I take it?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so in the follicular phase, see, first of all, seed cycling has no evidence-based data on it. So it's a naturopathy remedy. And in the follicular phase, what is advised is a spoonful of flaxseed and pumpkin seed. And in the luteal phase, a spoonful of sunflower seeds and sesame seed. This is what is advised as per the protocol. But again, reiterating the fact that there are no evidence-based trials done on this.
Thank you. I think the next Priya can take, this is about how do we exactly give methi seeds? I mean, are they taken raw, or are they, what is to be done with them?
So if you see traditional preparation of methi, in the West, it is sprouted and, there's a vegetable made out of it. This is what Gujaratis do. In the South, it is used as a fermentation, I would say, when you're soaking idli or dosa, it is just soaked along with rice and just ground, and it becomes a part of your idli, dosa, and those kind of preparations. Okay. In the North, it is used into tadkas. So we Indians, I think, can use anything and everything into tadkas. As long as it's going in the base. So there are multiple ways of using methi seeds. You don't have to torture yourself by eating only a spoonful. So you can probably roast it slightly, mix it with sauv, some variety of seeds. Sauv being a mouth freshener and gives in that little refreshing taste, which can be so even children might like to reach out to the mukhwas, which is a traditional Indian practice. So multiple ways of using methi seeds. If anybody else would like to add to more recipes from your kitchen.
I think we'll move to the next question. So there's a question about how does strength training help in managing metabolic syndrome as opposed to aerobic training? I think Neeti can take that.
Right. So I think there are multiple ways in which it helps. One is, of course, it is a form of physical activity. As our previous session, Dr. Contractor said, you just have to move. So it's another way of moving. Secondly, of course, over time, it builds muscle mass, okay, so which will help in increasing insulin sensitivity. The sugar which is circulating in the blood will have another place to move. There will be more muscle where the sugar can move in, so which will again help PCOS in the longer term. And thirdly, of course, as one grows older, it will help in just maintaining muscle mass. It will help in keeping the skeletal system in a much, much better shape. So I think there are multiple benefits, no matter which age group you're talking about, but it should form part of your exercise routine.
All right. So it's basically a combination of aerobic. We're not just supporting one. We are saying aerobic, but mix it with a non-consecutive 2 or 3 days of strength training.
Absolutely.
Just to,
couple of days in a week, also a couple of sessions, and it doesn't have to be heavy duty weight training, but light weights will still do the job. And even the even if you just tie the bottles, you know, your water bottles around your ankle and do that also works. Simple barbells, just now because of pandemic, a lot of people have just bought simple bars, dumbbells at home, and they're doing it because the gyms were shut.
Yeah. Great. And I think there's a question regarding intermittent fasting. Is there a minimum age when a person can actually start with intermittent fasting? Basically, it was a question from a 16-year-old who did not mention anything else. She just mentioned, I'm 16 years old, and she's very eager to go on IF. So is that recommended?
I would say do it under guidance. Consult a dietitian. Maybe we need to check what is the aim of
Her IF.
Yes, what is the aim? If it is weight loss, it has to be done under proper guidance. I mean, especially for these young adolescents who thinks it's a fad to do a keto or an IF, or they just look up articles or probably role models from the industry and just want to follow them. But please do it under guidance. Consult a qualified dietitian. Maybe speak out why you want to do it, how you want to do it, and maybe she'll be a better expert to guide you, and may not just blindly go into a 16-hour or a 20-hour window.
Can I add a bit here? Can I add?
Yes,
here?
please.
So the youngsters especially are taking up IF for an excuse of skipping breakfast and waking up late. They're waking up late, they're skipping breakfast. The mothers have been complaining that they're doing this, and the kids are saying I'm following IF. Okay. So IF cannot be a replacement for breakfast skipping. And in fact, there's more data that is coming in which says that early time restricted feeding gives better results. So like you eat at 8 a.m. and stop at 4 p.m., 5 p.m. You do not start at 1 p.m. and stop at 9 p.m., 10 p.m. So that I think that needs to be brought in, especially for youngsters.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be fasting in the day and then binge eating with Netflix all through the night. I think that's what most of the teenagers are doing.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think this is a question to all of you open. I really want to know, is rice really all that bad? Because I see many people from South who are like ardent rice eaters, and I am from Kashmir and we are like ardent, we swear by rice, and we still don't have many obese and overweight people. So is rice really all that bad?
You're muted, Shiny.
Okay.
No, this is open for all of you. So anyone who wants to take this.
Yeah, rice is harmless as long as you know the quantity, the portion sizes. When we calculate the calories and give according to their calorie requirement, we specify, because we prescribe idlis, dosas, uttappams. All these are rice-based dishes. And then even for lunch, they do take rice. And sometimes for dinner, there could be khichdi. But then the ratio of rice versus dal and vegetables would be much more, which means 1 part of rice and then 2 or 3 portions of vegetables along with a little bit of lentils. So I think it's about bringing the glycemic index under check, right? So you're ensuring that it is low GI foods, and that is what makes a big difference. So when they work with a nutritionist, a dietitian, there wouldn't be any issues at all.
No, I'm saying
rice is safe, gluten-free, and brown rice or else unpolished rice is loaded with micronutrients, B complex.
You know, I think it's more about processed carbohydrates like biscuits and all these fast foods that have actually, you know, come into play somewhere where this obesity pandemic has set in. It's not exactly the rice. Now rice has just taken all the blame, and you know there are people who are like no rice on the dining table. But I think majority of the populations who are active, who are ardent rice eaters, but they are active and don't have a lot of processed carbohydrates and fast foods on their table, they do pretty fine with rice.
I wanted to ask one question. Now, nowadays, you get these ragi biscuits, which are homemade or you get from the whole wheat. Are they still as bad as the processed one, what you get outside? I mean, if this thing. So I'm not sure about it. So
Yes, so it is still an issue because it still will use either butter or margarine or sugar, or if not sugar, then some honey or jaggery. So the calories are still coming in, and you know the homemade cookies nowadays, you see they are double the size of the biscuits you get outside. So in fact, the number of calories and the carbs are only going up. So just because it's homemade doesn't necessarily mean it's healthy.
So no, we have in the nutrition industry, it's very well known. What melts in your mouth swells in your tummy. So if a food is melting in your mouth, means you're going to find it, down there in your abdomen. So I think that is a check whether it's homemade or it is outside food. So anything where you have to chew into it means it's calling for some effort and some energy or some fiber that's saying, oh hello, chew me. So that's the mark. So whether it's homemade or it's outside, watch for this mark.
I wanted to add one thing. The biggest, in India, if anything is homemade, it becomes good. And I think that attitude should go away. Samosa is homemade, then it is okay. I think it's not about where it is made. It is about how it is made. And I think unless that has been taken into consideration, it won't work. So whether you are making samosa out of ragi, it is still samosa. It doesn't matter how it was made. So therefore, I think that is something which, as awareness, it should come among people. How is the food made? Because surprisingly, people have no clue. I have had patients telling me, I eat a fruit every day. I said, which one? Banana as banana chips. So, this is the kind of, we need to have more awareness of nutrition. Banana cannot be banana chips, or apple cannot be apple juice, or apple pie cannot be a source of fruit, for example.
Yes.
So basically, when you talk, we can always bake instead of frying. So what do you say about this? You get those air fryers and all. Are they really good? And I mean, is it? Do you get healthy food when you're using the air fryers? I don't know. So I'm.
No, so yes, of course, you are cutting down on your oil intake because you just brush your samosa and you put it in the air fryer and it bakes well. So you're not deep frying it. So you are definitely cutting down on the fat content, but still the aloo and the peas and the maida which goes into samosa is still there. So it does not become.
It's not samosa. I mean, the other things also wherein
it could be French fries. It could be French fries. Still the potato remains. It could be kachori. It could be bhaji. So the oil part, of course, it does cut down because you're not deep frying. The fat content does go down, but the refined carbs or the carbs per se still remain. So the calorie content will go down.
I think there are some 3 more questions in the chat box about.
I would have one more point of view on using air fryers or these kind of cooking methodology. So sometimes I feel that what is the race that is getting the food to cook? Are we really aware of the nutrition content post in the air fryer? Have we done a lab testing of what are the nutrient losses, or are we just worried about the fat? So I have these kind of questions which people just say that I've resorted to an air fryer because the fat is less, but I'm really worried about the rays and maybe just the temperature, or how carcinogenic it can get maybe going on 50 years from now. So I'm not.
That's what they say even about the microwave. So it's better to heat the food on the gas rather than in a microwave.
Also, there is a lot of data to show that when food is dry heated,
yes,
advanced glycation end products increase. So, and we know that, especially conditions like PCOS, which are highly pro-inflammatory. If you're going, as it is, there is a lot of inflammation in the body. And then when your food adds on to the inflammatory index, then the whole purpose is lost. So a lot of these foods are extremely pro-inflammatory when they are exposed to such methods of eating. Like Priya rightly said, we don't have data. Therefore, we cannot, firmly say that, these are good or these are bad. But ultimately, when we look at, how advanced glycation end products are made, one of them is heat, direct heat.
We have one more question that's just come in. They want to know about sugar substitutes as sweeteners. And they also want to know about paleo diet. I think it'll be some other fad diet.
Can I take sugar substitutes?
Yeah, you can take both. You can take both, or you can split.
Take that. Take the paleo one. You go ahead with the sugar.
So sugar substitutes, there are many in market and all are FDA approved, whatever is in the market. So this whole thing that, a particular sugar substitute causes cancer and memory loss and all is at a very, very high amount. So there are ADIs, acceptable daily intakes, and only when you go beyond that. But it's not, the problem is not sugar substitute. Problem is the food in which you add the sugar substitute. So if you're going to make, like they show in the TV ad, that meri beti ko kheer achhi lagti hai, so I made it in sugar substitute, then that sugar substitute is of no use. You cannot make kheer and all in it. You want to put it in your tea, coffee, probably a sharbat, as long as it is used as a tabletop sweetener and not used for cooking. Because like that air fryer in question or any other question, like Neeti said, you may not use oil, but you're using everything else. You're just not using sugar. You're using everything else. You're going to make a bundi ka laddu in sweetener, you're frying, you're using everything, but not sugar. I don't think it helps.
One more point I would like to add here is that excessive sweetener consumption. So if you're adding it to a couple of cups of tea, coffee, that's fine. But if you want a license to have 3 cans of Diet Coke, which a lot of youngsters, are habituated and they want to do that. So excessive artificial sweetener consumption is known to disturb the gut microbiome. So that is a very big no-no. And also, in fact, excessive sugar sweetener consumption increases your craving for sugar more, sweets more. There are studies which have shown that. So again, moderation is the key. Anything in excess, issues.
Okay.
So excess of everything is bad.
Yes.
Paleo diet.
Yeah. See, the typical Western paleo diet is where there are no grains and the food largely consists of good fats and then a lot of vegetables and there's no lentils either. Okay. Now, this doesn't work in our scenario at all. We are people who are eating dal chawal, roti and dal, this is how we've been. And a lot of people who actually followed, the typical cut and paste paleo, which was advocated by the Western population, they ended up losing quite a lot of hair and they went for hair transplantation. So cosmetologists and dermatologists, they were very busy because I've worked in aesthetic clinics and I know so many of my friends shared this information. So what happened with following a typical ketogenic or the Paleolithic diet, they ended up with hair loss and a lot of micronutrient deficiency. And at the end of the day, they were so scared to eat. A lot of people had eating disorders also. After a point, they were like so scared to eat the typical upma, ya poha, ya idli or dosa, even a simple regular meal, right? Okay, the best would be to have a modified desi version. a Indian version where there's still a balanced meal where you have dal, the sabzi, the good fats, and then the quantity of rice or roti can be structured or rather controlled according to a person's requirement and their degree of insulin resistance. So maybe initially they can go on a very low carb diet, but then the carbohydrates needn't necessarily come from grains, but it can come from the dal, the vegetable, the fruit, and all of that. And then slowly, once you get their weight under control, they'll be able to bend and stretch and be able to do a lot more exercise. And then slowly reintroduce the carbohydrates, okay, step up and then see what's the threshold. Then things work out beautifully. This has been the strategy that I've applied and it's worked really well. Because when you cut out all the grains and the legumes, they have severe hair loss and then it damages their already low self-esteem. And for women, hair is very important.
For everybody. Right?
Hair on their scalp.
I know we are over time here. One last question. How many of y'all as the health professionals at home are the ghar ki murgi who's nagging everyone at home? And rather than being successful, because that's what I turn out to be when I'm advising everybody. So are you all having the same experience, or is everybody really successful in managing this in their own homes as well?
With kids, we are very difficult.
Yeah, I know.
In fact, I had actually invited my son over who was trying to listen to some of the discussion, and then he was like fed up. He's not into junk food, but he is fond of food. Right. And it's very difficult. He's very inert as far as exercise is concerned. So we really have to push him really hard.
What about all our nutritionists? How are you all successful?
Ghar ki murgi dal barabar, yes.
Totally. We are I don't know how we all are successful at home. Just curious.
I think there was another question which says about safety of soy-based diet or meso food in PCOS.
It depends on the quality of soy that's available in their city. It is difficult. It is a challenge. It's good to use fresh soybeans, just like how we get the fresh green peas that you can just, those pods that you get, that would still be safe rather than something that's processed. It is a little difficult to get good quality. Sometimes sources.
No. What about the ones which are dried? The dried soya. I mean, if you add that, not the processed one, but if you have something which is grown in your own fields and dried, and when you add that to your wheat atta or something.
Yeah. Like how chickpeas is also added to gehum ka atta and then rotis are prepared. All portions, I think that's still fine. I do recommend that. I would like to know what.
Not what you get in the
Shilpa would have to.
If you have the dal itself.
No, I would like to add here. So soybean cannot be ground raw. It needs to be heat processed, and then only it can be used. So you cannot mix your gehu at home and get kacha soybean and grind together, send it to the chakki.
No, but I'm doing it now. We get it from our own field. So what I have done is I have removed the outer skin and I made a dal out of it, which I add.
Because there are certain factors which need to be
denatured.
Yes, denatured by heat. So you
need to roast it. You need to roast it and then add it.
Yes. Sometimes sprouting helps, ma'am.
So either you have to roast it, okay, or cook it and have it like a bhaji, like a vegetable. But do not mix it with your atta, the raw beans. Yeah.
Yeah, Madhuri makes lovely food anyway, but I believe whenever there's a discussion on diet, it always gets personal, and everybody has questions which are personal and observations which are personal, so it's a never-ending thing. But that was a great discussion and I enjoyed listening to it very much. Thank you very much.
Prabhat, maybe we can close the session right now?
Yeah, I thought you were all eager to do that. Thank you very much, everybody. I think it was an exhaustive but an excellent interactive discussion on literally all aspects of healthy living in PCOS. And we have only one take-home message, that's lifestyle modifications, your healthy living, exercise, healthy eating. That is the holy grail. And we look forward to having all our panelists as permanent members, life members, and associate members of PCOS Society of India. because we do have associate members from nutrition, from diet, and from physiotherapy, as well as fitness. So please do join us at PCOS Society, because we're doing a great job in patient and physician education and for bringing all